the Okay, well, hopefully it does what it's supposed to do because it didn't give me an option to record to the cloud. So hopefully it does. So welcome to the Lasting Weight Loss Masterclass. I'm Melissa Petersen, and I am a lifelong health seeker. And about 22 years ago, I became a group fitness instructor. About 4 years ago, I started doing coaching in a private community on food addiction. And I did that for myself in my own journey. And I'll be talking about that. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen um, because I have a slideshow. And hold on just a second. Got to grab something off my printer. So the I have a slideshow that I'm going to start, and just give me a second. I love Zoom, except for when it like slides away from me when I touch something. Okay, here we go. Sharing my screen. If you guys can't hear me, let me know if there's something. Just like say something, or if you can't see. There we go. Share my screen. Okay. So here we go. Here is the slideshow. Hopefully you can all see that. Um, and like I said, this is Lasting Weight Loss Masterclass. And why wanting to lose weight is just not enough. And we're going to talk about the 3 shifts that will change your body. All right, there we go. So basically, why are you here? And just, I am really glad that you're all here. It's an optimal health masterclass, and it's for anyone who's ever said, I know what to do, I just don't do it every day. I don't do it consistently. I'm so tired of starting again on Monday. Um, I have tried every diet, and nothing seems to really stick. And what I want you to know is you are not the trouble. What is the trouble is that we're addicted to processed food, and I'm going to give you a little bit of information and background about that. You know, we have we have processed food companies, and if you all remember back to the tobacco companies, they used addiction models and targeted people to get them sick. So the thing with the tobacco companies is when they started getting busted, they started investing into food companies and bought companies like Kraft and Whole Foods. And what happened was is they used those same addiction models to get us addicted to processed food and sugar. And what they do is they balance fat, sugar, and salt in the perfect combination so that the foods that you buy, that are tend to come in packages, you crave them. Like, it's like when you get done with work, you're like, oh, I could really use that thing, and then you go and buy it because you're craving it. And they do it on purpose. And so the thing is, like this whole system we have this. And then also, I would say that I think that the health and fitness system also I think that people just don't understand what's going on. I'd like to think that people aren't malicious and targeting other people, but like you've heard calories in and calories out. That's a complete lie. There's so much more that goes on than calories in and calories out. And so then what they do is they're like, well, you just didn't exercise enough. You just didn't restrain yourself enough. And that is why you can't meet your goals. And so then you feel shame and blame for, what the trouble is. So that's why you're here because you think that it's you and it's not. And so you know, that's my story. I got here because I was tired of yo-yoing. I was tired of living on literally a roller coaster. I mean, not literally, figuratively on a roller coaster. And that's how I felt my life was like. I would do really good and I'd eat really well, and I was always consistent on working out because I was a fitness instructor, so I had to show up for class even if I didn't want to. And and that's how I did it. And I thought, oh, I'll just spend more time on the Stairmaster. And like it didn't matter. And I can tell you, like, I remember when I was in college, I was taking all these like fitness classes and doing all this stuff, but it didn't matter because I could not out move my mouth. My mouth was, I was gaining weight doing all these things. And so it is not just calories in, it's not calories out. And sometimes no matter how hard we try, um, you know, those addictions are still there. But there is hope. So this kind of goes into the big problem, the myth of willpower. So 74% of adults are overweight. So if it was as simple as just like, oh, I'm just going to eat clean today, nobody would need this class. Nobody would need anything. So everyone desires health. I mean, nobody wants to be like, oh, hey, I'd like to be overweight today. That's not what it is. So wanting is not enough, and willpower is short. Willpower is like, I think that you have like maybe 3 minutes of willpower and then it goes away. And so you cannot rely on willpower to overcome the addiction that we have to processed food. And many of you guys are disciplined. You've built careers, you've raised children, or you're raising children, and you've survived hardship. And, you've shown resilience again and again. So when, you know, stuff doesn't stick, it's so frustrating and it's confusing. And you start wondering about yourself, like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I follow through? Why do I keep ending up here again? And I just want to say that it's not you. You are not broken. You are not defective. And you are not failing at this in life. You're trying to use force to solve a problem that requires a different solution. And that is why I'm going to explain some of these things. So again, here you're not lazy, you're not broken. You're missing structure and support. That is the problem. And um, willpower. Willpower collapses because um, people assume that they are weak. Um, but, like I said, willpower, we try to push harder. We try to be more disciplined. We try to stay consistent. We try to control ourselves. But it can only create a short-term change. It cannot override hunger completely for a long time. You can't override exhaustion. You can't override emotion. Um, and eventually, willpower collapses under stress, emotional overwhelm, trauma, fatigue, and life disruption. And so it will collapse under real life. And when it collapses, you think, oh, well, it's just me. And you don't realize that it's actually not just you. And it's your system. It's more than you can sustainably hold. And then we feel shame, and we feel like we're failures, and we don't want to start over again. Let's see. So the three core shifts: your mind, your food, and your movement. So the biggest thing is the mind. So if we were to split up what it takes to have permanent success in health and weight loss, the first thing is 80%, it's 80% of your mind. And so I call it the 80%. Um, so, we already talked about that motivation fades, and and sometimes we have these systems where we are all or nothing thinkers. And we're like, well, I didn't go work out today, so I'm just going to eat all this sugar, you know? Or, I was at a party and I had a piece of cake, so I'm just going to eat more. So it's all or nothing thinking kills our progress. And we don't, the other thing is, like, in our society, we do not have any sort of we don't teach ourselves self-love, self-compassion. We don't teach ourselves that it's okay to rest. We don't we teach ourselves that we need to give, give, give. We need to work, 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 and do, do, do. And we don't teach ourselves boundaries, to that it's okay to say no. And sometimes, saying no to others is saying yes to ourselves. And so there's a lot of stuff in our identity that drives our behavior. And so that is really important. The other thing is that, to go with, like, motivation fades. And so what do we need in order to, like, stay on the wagon? And what we need is, in our um, recovery. I'm going to call it recovery because it is. In our journey, one of the things that helps, and it's probably the biggest driver for change, is that we have this thing in our brain, and it's called mirror neurons. And what mirror neurons do is it causes us to want to be like our tribe. So when you are in a group, you tend to want to you pick up some of the behaviors of the group. Like when you go to church, they say iron sharpens iron, and we want to be like other people in church. We want to do the same things they do. We want to stay on track like they do. When we're around, people in, like, a club, we want to be like that club. When we go, like, say, to work out, we're trying to do the things that people at the workout do. We get motivated because we're around people doing it. And so then we're trying to do the same things they are. And the trouble that we have in society is that processed food and sugar are everywhere. You can't walk into a gas station, you can't walk into a store without prominent displays just being there. And then your favorite things, just sitting right in front of you, and how can you pass them by? And it's everywhere. It's like, if you go to you go to your faith organization, and they have treats everywhere. And you just can't escape it. You go to a party and there's junk, and then people try to be like, well, I made that for you. And you got people pushing food on you. So, like, everywhere, that we are around, our mirror neurons are engaging with society and society's view on food, and that it's okay to eat that stuff. And maybe you're thinking that it is because, I've been in a community for a long time online where, we try to abstain from using those things. And I'm going to just call them substances because there's research out there that shows that, and I have, like, a whole textbook on it, that, cocaine is less addictive than sugar. And it really is. And we don't go telling alcoholics, oh, hey, go have a sip of that drink. We don't do that. We don't say, oh, just do it in moderation. But we do with sugar. We tell everybody, oh, moderation's okay. And that's where you hear it because, it makes a lot of money. And it's a huge driver, which is why, we didn't even see change in our food pyramid until this year. They're telling us to have, 7 or 8 servings of grains, and those are like some of the worst things that you can eat, 7 or 8 servings of. It's like the food pyramid was upside down. And why did it take this long to change? Well, probably big money, is what my guess is. So, we have to shift our mind, and we have to learn how to manage and cope with stress and emotions, because our stress pathways are the same pathways as our addictive pathways. And so, our, like, for example, dairy triggers the same pathways that opioids do in our brain. Um, and so there's certain foods that are, you could still eat them if you wanted to. I mean, that dairy is considered healthy. Um, but it also, can lead to, a relapse in eating the foods you don't want to eat. So there's just a lot of information. We don't have the support we need out in the real world. You need to have people that you can engage with, either listening, seeing, and so you know having that structure, having that support is extremely important, because if you don't work on the 80% and you don't have the mirror neuron engagement, it's it's extremely hard, and your odds at having lasting change go down substantially. So really super important. The next thing, food. Um, having protein at most of your meals is very important. And, when I work with people, I think that it is important that they kind of figure out, like, I mean, I could tell you what to eat if you want. Um, but it may not work for you. It might be something that you have to just sort of try and tweak and see how it goes for you. But I would say that protein is huge. Fiber, I put a question mark there, because depending on the kind of diet you eat, fiber is not necessarily necessary. Um, Healthy fats are extremely important, and also small carb portions, because small carb portions, you don't need a ton of carbs. Just depends on what you're doing. I think it's more important to have the protein and the fat. The carbs can also be a part of it. Um, that's my ideal way to eat. Um, you don't have to be perfect. You just need to have consistent abstinence. And that doesn't mean that you can't, and I'm not saying in moderation, but that you try to be as abstinent as possible. And as you are with, a group of people that are trying to do that, trying to have consistent abstinence, um, it gets easier. And you don't feel, I mean, my grandpa always said he was obese, and he had a belly, and he's like, why do I want to get rid of this? Like, spend all this money to put this here? And some people are like, well, if I can't have chocolate, then I'd rather die early instead of giving up chocolate, or something like that. And I'm not necessarily saying that. This is a journey that you come in and you figure out yourself. But I will say that it's easier to stay on the wagon than it is to get back on. So, being consistently abstinent is um, is important in long lasting success, because that's why we keep going back, because we swing up and we swing down with emotions and stress, and then we we're better with our food, and then we get worse, and then we go down the rabbit hole, and then we try to get back on, and then sometimes we do, and then we do better, and then it's a vicious cycle. um, all right, and then movement. So for movement, so I told you that, 80% is your brain, and it's your mirror neuron engagement. Um, and then I would say for the rest of the 20%, of that 20%, 90% is your food and 10% is your exercise. So I'm not saying don't exercise, but you know what? Like sometimes that's the last thing that changes. The first thing we have to focus on is your mindset. The second thing we focus on is your food. We try to do the food at the same time, but like the movement will eventually come because eventually your brain is going to clear out. Your brain fog is going to be gone, and and like the lethargy that you don't even know that you have because you haven't been away from sugar long enough to even know the lack of energy that you have from eating like that. And so it's hard to know. So we first of all we just want to focus on our mind shift, and especially if you've had like trauma or just stuff happen, because we all have had stuff, and I have skills that I can use to help heal some of those things or to find them. Like let's say there's a behavior that you want to stop, and you're like you don't know why you even do it. We can get to the root of that, and you can heal from some of those things, and it makes a huge difference in your outlook um, when you are with people who learn kindness and self-compassion and love for themselves. I mean, I'm not saying that we're going to be vain or we're going to think we're better than everybody else. It's not even like that. But because if you cannot fill your own cup, then how are you going to fill everyone else's? So, you have to take care of yourself, take care of your mind. And so we do that first. And then we do focus on the food. We try to get the food, cleaned up the best we can. I know tricks for overcoming food lapses and things like that I can teach. The third thing is, the movement, and um, consistency beats intensity. If you can do something daily, like even if it's for like a minute, then do it. If you're not ready to do the movement, eventually you will be because you're going to have energy from cutting out the bad things in your life or that are in your mind, that are in your food that you're using to cope with your life. Um, and you know, um, just doing simple things like, you can just go out for a walk, like after you eat a meal. That's the perfect time to go for a walk because it actually helps your insulin to go for a walk after you have a meal. You could do, they call them like, uh, squat snacks. You could just do like, get up out of your chair and do like 10 squats, just right where you're at. And just being mindful of movement. Maybe you park farther away from the door so that you get a few extra steps. You don't have to like go crazy, but you just ask yourself, did I move today? And so, you're then you start seeing yourself as a person who moves their body, and you're building that identity through action. So that is the other thing. So, the five ingredients that you need for lasting change is accountability. How are you going to hold yourself accountable? Clear direction. Like what are your goals? Do you have a plan that goes into that will help you be successful? Being in a community is very important, having like someone else, because you are like the five people you're closest to. So if you're around a bunch of people that eat junk food, guess what you're going to be? You're going to be eating it. If you're around a bunch of people that don't go to the gym or prioritize movement, you don't have to go to the gym, but just prioritizing some movement, you're not going to move. And so those mirror neurons, what I was telling you about, having that mirror neuron engagement is extremely important. And you need support. You need support, encouragement. You need someone to point out. Sometimes, we're going through rough times and we need someone to reframe what we're doing right because there are wins that we may not see, but other people do. And so, information alone is not enough. Doing it on your own is not enough. Having that community, having someone to support you is huge. And I can tell you that that is what made the difference for me to learn all these things and to have near neuron engagement with others. I've had my own coaches and support because it is extremely hard to find success in this world the way that it's designed, especially with food. It's not like you can walk into a store and you can find cocaine everywhere. It's not like you can walk into a store and you see alcohol right when you walk in. I mean, maybe in an alcohol store, but not at the gas station and everywhere you go and all, in your faith organization and right into like any social gathering. Usually there's food, there's not always alcohol, but you know what I'm saying? It's just not like in your face all the time. Um, so, um, so what you need is a coaching plan. Um, I have weekly coaching calls. I have strategies and accountability check-ins. And I can support people. So if that's something that you're interested in, I definitely could help you do that. Um, if you're just interested in it and you want to know what it entails, or you just want some help, you don't have to like necessarily do a group thing. You could just do something one-on-one. But I would set up a one-on-one coaching call with you, and my phone number is there, and my email. And I'll also send you an email with the information so you don't have to necessarily write this down. Um, and and you can book a call, and the call that you book is free. There will be probably limited spots because I'm gonna try to have smaller groups, and you know, that way we can be more in depth. And when it's filled, it's filled. Um, and I just want to thank you for being here. Um, if there was one thought that you could upgrade on, I would say that, it's not your fault. And, just really knowing that and having support is huge. Maybe simplify one food decision today, um, before you go. Maybe you decide, and I would recommend not building Rome in a day on your food decisions. Don't be like cutting everything out and starting cold turkey tomorrow. But I mean, you could, but that might be a little bit more white knuckling it. But maybe you make one food decision, you decide to cut one thing out. You do one simple decision at a time. And then when you feel ready to make the next one, you make the next one. Because one of the things that's really important is that you don't rush. These things take time because if your brain gets the sense that you're changing everything all at once, it's going to stress out and it's going to fire in your stress pathways. And I already told you your stress pathways are your addiction pathways. And so people who push really hard to get everything done super fast usually don't see lasting change. So lasting change, we take one step at a time. We do it at your pace. And also, maybe think about what you can do to add some movement into your day to get some consistency, not necessarily intensity, not necessarily length, but just consistency. So, upgrading a thought, simplifying one food decision, and moving your body consistently are things that you can do today to start real change. So let me end my show here. Oops. All right. So I don't know if anybody has any questions um, about the slideshow. Because if you do, now would be a good time. And if you're, if you want to share anything about like, your journey or your struggles or anything like that, feel free. Like I said, it has taken me most of my adult life to figure things out. And what I did wrong was I didn't work on the 80%. I didn't have the community of support. And once I figured that out, I actually became a coach in it. And and then I finally found my way to lasting change. Like no longer am I like riding the roller coaster anymore in my emotions. No longer am I riding the roller coaster anymore in my food. Everything is really consistent and I feel incredible. I have incredible energy. I'm so grateful. I'm so happy. Um, and I look forward to my healthy life. And I'm grateful, for all my friends and my family, my children, and just the wonderful opportunities that I have in life. And grateful to Jesus. I never would have gotten here had I not started on that path. So that is my presentation. And I really thank you all for being here. And I'm going to end the recording, maybe.